Imagine booking a vacation where you paid thousands of dollars, packed your finest clothes, and still weren't allowed to eat in the same dining room as the person in the cabin right next to you. Not because of anything you did wrong, simply because of which ticket you could afford. That was cruising 60 years ago, and before you assume it sounds romantic or charmingly old-fashioned, wait until you hear what passengers were actually getting for that money. Because the answer is going to change how you see every cruise you ever take from this point forward. In 1966, a cruise was built around one idea above everything else: class. Not elegance, social rank. When you booked your ticket, you chose your class: first class, cabin class, or tourist class, and that single choice controlled your entire voyage. Where you slept, where you ate, which decks you were permitted to walk on. Two people could board the exact same ship on the exact same morning and live completely separate vacations, divided by locked doors and physical barriers that neither was allowed to cross. The ship wasn't one experience shared by everyone aboard. It was three different worlds stacked on top of each other, and most passengers only ever saw one of them. First-class passengers had private promenade decks, formal multi-course dinners served by white-gloved waiters, and cabins with actual windows looking out at the ocean. Tourist-class passengers were placed deep inside the ship, in cabins with no window, no natural light, and no way of knowing whether it was morning or the middle of the night. Some of those cabins held 6 people in bunk beds, sharing a bathroom down the hallway with the entire deck. And here is what makes it almost impossible to believe those tourist class passengers were still paying prices that, adjusted for today's inflation, would equal several $1,000s per person. More money, less of everything. Now compare that to what any cruiser today walks into. A private cabin, frequently with a balcony, a flat-screen television, a bathroom entirely their own, and the freedom to eat whenever they want, wherever they want, from multiple venues open around the clock. No class barriers, no locked decks, no assigned dining time they had no say in choosing. What replaced the rigid structure of 1,960 seconds? Cruising is something that passenger from 60 years ago would have found almost unimaginable: complete freedom of movement on a vessel the size of a floating city. And the ships themselves tell the whole story. The SS France, launched in 1962 and considered the greatest ocean liner of her era, carried around 2,000 passengers. Today, Royal Caribbean's icon of the seas carries over 7,000. She has 7 pools, 40 restaurants and bars, an indoor garden with real living trees, and a waterfall built inside the ship. The SS France had a dining room, a smoking lounge, and an orchestra that played in the evenings. That gap between those two ships is exactly what 60 years of change looks like. Entertainment in 1966 meant a magician or a dance act if your class level got you through the lounge door. The highlight of many voyages was the captain's cocktail party, genuinely special, partly because there was so little else on offer. Today, that same passenger can watch a Broadway production at sea, ride a Florida surf simulator, visit a comedy club, and sit down to a 12-course tasting menu, all before the ship reaches its first port. The transformation in what cruising offers is so extreme that comparing the two barely feels fair. But here is where the story turns, and where nostalgia starts making sense in a way that is hard to argue with. In 1966, there was no Wi-Fi, no phone pulling your attention away from the person sitting across from you. When you boarded a ship 60 years ago, you were completely and genuinely cut off from the rest of the world, and passengers found that liberating in ways that no cruise line today can fully recreate. Friendships formed over long dinners because there was nowhere else to be and nothing else competing for attention. Conversations went deep. People were actually present with each other in a way that is increasingly rare on a modern ship where almost everyone is half watching a screen. So here is the honest picture of what cruising looked like 60 years ago. Smaller ships, strict class divisions, cramped cabins with no light for most passengers, limited entertainment, and prices that, in real terms, were higher than what many people pay today for a far superior experience. By every measurable standard, the modern cruiser has more, pays less, and moves through the world with a freedom that 1966 could not have offered. But those passengers had one thing no itinerary today can sell you: true disconnection. No notifications, no noise, just the ocean, the ship, and the people around you. Whether that sounds like a loss or a luxury depends entirely on who you are. The question worth sitting with is this: which version of cruising would you actually choose?